Ethan, it's so great to have you on the Unbuttoned podcast. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling good. Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah. Are you hype excited? Would you say like this is one of the most exciting moments in your life?
Yeah, I mean, like it's got to be right up there with like Penn acceptance and my birth, all those moments. This and the Unbuttoned podcasts are probably about equal. Yeah,
I think it probably goes like Unbuttoned number one, then birth, then pen acceptance, right? That's
yeah, that's a good ordering.
amazing. So yeah, introduce yourself, Ethan. Tell everyone a little bit about yourself, like your major, your year, some of the extracurriculars you've been a part of at Penn.
Yeah. So, hi everyone again. My name is Ethan Soloway. I'm a senior, I guess, graduating this year at Penn, majoring in mathematics. So we can definitely talk more about what got me interested in that. And outside of math, I've been involved pretty heavily in singing extracurriculars on campus. So both through an a cappella group, the Penn Shabbatones, which is an a cappella group with, of people with Jewish cultural backgrounds. So we can talk about that. I was previously co-president of that organization, so I have experience leading it and just a lot of the value that I've taken away from that. And then also there's the Penn Glee Club, which is another singing organization, but more choral style. It's slightly different from a cappella. And I can definitely talk about both of those more. But yeah.
Yeah. So let's get into the math a bit. So you're telling me that your math major, so you're senior now, so you've done 4 years of that. You're sub-matting. Tell me about the masters that you're gonna receive too. So you're gonna get 2 degrees in 4 years. Pretty awesome. Like what I guess, yeah, what masters will you receive and we'll go from there.
Yeah. So I guess I came into Penn. Let's start from there. I came into Penn knowing knowing that I wanted to do math. I kind of enjoyed it in high school. It was always something I was kind of good at, and I did some summer programs in math, in particular this proof-based math, which I found to be a lot more creative and stimulating and just like interesting than just kind of a lot of the math that you learn in high school, which is a lot of memorization and formulas. And that wasn't my favorite kind. I like the kind of math that's collaborative and it feels like you're thinking up new ideas and kind of solving really open problems. So I knew I wanted to do math coming in, and for the first few years, I was taking like proof-based math courses and enjoying it. And then I found out about this sub-math program where, at least at Penn, you can obtain a master's in 4 years along with the bachelors, and don't actually have to take too many extra classes for it. So that was one of the reasons why I was like, "Yep, so sign me up for that." It's a total of something like 8 classes total for the masters, but 4 of them can also count towards your undergrad. Um, so those kind of already fit in with my trajectory of what classes I was taking. And I had to pass an exam. That was a little tricky, but I studied and did well and passed that last year, and also write a math thesis, which I just recently finished up. So yeah.
Now yeah, so you said proof-based math, and I think there's I don't know, there's a lot of like stereotypes about math. People get turned off of math. I think personally, like one of the biggest reasons is like the way it's taught early on in school. Like you said, like memorizing stuff, and like to be honest, like if it's I feel like taught in the right way and it's the right kind of math, it's probably a lot of fun. Like it's creative, like you're tinkering with things, um, rather than having to just brute force memorize all this stuff. So yeah, how did you kind of realize your interest in proof-based math? Just is that after you came to Penn? Was that at a Penn math program you took, or, it started even earlier than that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it started even earlier. I mean, kind of coincidentally or fortunately, it was I think my first summer during high school. So I guess I really didn't. It was like the summer of ninth grade. I really didn't have any plans. I wasn't sure what I was going to be doing the summer besides just like going on vacation with my family. And there was like a random posting in I guess my ninth grade geometry class at Masterman about this summer program. It took place at Princeton, and it was like in discrete mathematics. for students who like math and want to spend their summer learning more math. And I was like, yeah, I like math pretty much, man. I don't really know what else I'm going to do this summer. So I applied and fortunately got in. And I went to that program, yeah, for that first year. And I was exposed to kind of this proof-based method of solving problems and just like also the create like I had done like math counts or other kind of like slightly creative problem solving programs before, but I really hadn't seen like proofs in that like logical yet creative and collaborative way of thinking before that. And I really enjoyed that experience. Yeah, the program was called PACT, I think PACT, program in algorithmic and combinatorial thinking. And I guess for students who maybe are at Penn or have taken computer science classes, it's kind of modeled after SIS 160, the um the discrete math course for computer science majors here. Um, but it's like high school students taking it. The thing that's was fortunate for us is that obviously it's summer program, so none of us were graded. So honestly, I feel like if I'd come into Penn and maybe taking SIS 160, having never seen proofs before, I would have struggled a lot. When I was taking it in this ninth grade year, I probably felt like I understood like 50% of the content or less the first time. But luckily, I was fortunate that I didn't have to receive grades for it. I was there just purely because I wanted to be,
Yeah.
and it was very challenging. But I was like, I felt challenged, but like really wanted to learn more. And it's kind of pushing through that challenge and that pain and like being passionate about math that really wanted me to keep pursuing math
Yeah.
later on.
No, yeah, that so talk a little more about because like, I think a lot of times, like, math just gets, like, frustrating, like, there's sometimes, like, you're working on something, there's no, like, clear answer in sight, and if you're working on a proof, and one that's, like, in some new area, not like a I don't know, like, a base when I think of proofs, I think of, like, basic geometry proofs I did in high school where, like, there's a very
Yeah.
clear, like, light at the end of the tunnel, but, yeah, with math, like, sometimes it probably just gets very difficult. So how does that, like, inspire you? And is that fun for you, or does that ever cause, like, frustration and, like, get you, like, triggered or angry? Because I for me, like, with math, that brought like, in even in 160 when I did discrete math, like, I would just get triggered, and I'd have to just, like, take a break, I get frustrated. That just might be my personality flaw, but how does that work?
No, I definitely wouldn't say it's a personality flaw. I think it's actually a very common experience for most people, all people, when they're doing math, and as it gets more difficult. I think really the toughest thing about math is just like pushing through and wanting to continue in those moments where you don't fully understand what's going on. I like to say that mathematicians are kind of all a little bit masochistic because we like put ourselves through a lot of pain and frustration, and especially in these advanced courses, like staring at the chalkboard for expressions like, oh, we may not even understand half the time, but it's just compelled like internally by an interest to keep wanting to learn more and push through that. That keeps me and I think other people interested in math. But no, I would say it's very common for me to have that experience of really not understanding something and feeling frustrated or even feeling some imposter syndrome, like, oh, maybe I'm really not that good, not after all. But I think it's very common that people experience that, and it's just something, yeah, it's something to work through. It's a reason why it's helpful to work with other people during math. It's because then you can share in that experience of not fully understanding what's going on, but working on it together. Um, and also just I think actually kind of not paradoxically, but maybe like counterintuitively, as you get further on, and maybe even as you're doing advanced math research, the timeline for doing math gets like longer and longer. So when I've been working on my master's thesis, like I've been researching and reading papers and like learning about this area over the course of a year. And there's a lot less pressure about like, oh, I need to finish an assignment by this date. And I'm definitely like half the time when I'm reading this material, like confused the first time and rereading the same proof or even trying to do some problem over and over again. But because there's not this time constraint and I can like have conversations with people and everyone was like interested and has this goal of like wanting to help each other learn, then that it feels like a really great environment to keep learning and studying that.
Yeah, and I feel like that's important, right? Because one, like, I personally feel like, yeah, like, the way math is taught, there's a lot of flaws with it, and that's what makes people disinterested because I feel like math is, like, inherently, like, it's a bigger picture, more creative thing that you should work with other people on. A lot of times it's like it comes down to like timed math, like you're graded on like a bunch of problems you have to do in a specific amount of time, and like that's how we test math primarily. I haven't personally thought of like a maybe a better way to test it, but I think when people come into Penn even too, like in their they have to like finish their math requirement. Like I did it when the numbers were different, but I think it's like math 1400. Is that calculus too?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and then the one after that, like people get frustrated. People don't like particularly the math department at Penn. I feel like it's probably similar with most math departments, like where you're teaching a calculus course like that. Do you have any like would you suggestions on like well, A, did you enjoy those like early math courses at Penn? And B, like, do you have any suggestions on like maybe how that could be improved or a better way of teaching it? Because I know people would like dread like having quizzes and like there'd be so much you have to do in, like, a short amount of time that, like, you're not even really enjoying it, you're just trying to cram it.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree with the need for reform on how these introductory math courses are taught. Um, I actually was fortunate enough or kind of intentionally avoided some of those intro math courses coming into Penn. I took I took um, I took BC Calc in high school, and then through there's a Young Scholars Program for students in Philadelphia. I took actually 114 at Penn, but as a high school student. But I took it online. It was like during COVID, and it was with Professor like Rimmer, like a very nice professor. So it was like kind of I think an easier version than the that introductory course. So when I got to Penn, I kind of circumvented some of those earlier courses and kind of try to get straight into the proof-based math, mainly because that's why I knew what I liked. And I'd actually, in general, just like heard relatively negative things about those intro courses. So I was like, I don't really want to have to take them if I want, because I heard so many people, even friends were interested in math and not interested in math, that they were turned off from math completely because of like the way that these courses were taught. But yeah, in terms of how I would think about changing them, I really think like the fundamental issue, like I mean, both I guess with these classes at Penn, but maybe even into high school and earlier about like how we teach math is that there's really less and less focus about this motivation of why we're doing things. Like I personally think math is interesting or even valuable as a skill because it teaches you how to think and question and solve like problems analytically. So not just turn yourself into an algorithm, which more and more like in our AI driven world, computers can do like almost any calculation better than a human can. What makes us still unique is our ability to kind of think through problems, decide where we can apply certain tools and kind of understand the bigger picture. So um, I think really I'm not a big fan of the quizzes, the format, and even in general the flip model of kind of like trying to learn everything at home and then doing problems. I really think, um, I guess I think you can't force all students to learn proof based math because that's not how everyone wants to think. But I think really just when you're formulating problems and setting them up, like going focusing more on the thought process of how you would even decide about like what tools and what techniques I'm going to use to solve the problem. Like I think so much of the class structure is about here's some random tool or thing. You don't know where the heck it comes from. It could be out of the sky. And then you have to just like boom, apply it to a bunch of example problems. And then even when you're taking these quizzes, sometimes the the work you have to do in your head to actually kind of realize what tool you need to use to solve the problem is like is probably the harder part than even just like solving the integral or plugging in the numbers that you need. So there's really not as much focus on like individual problem solving creativity and more so on just learning the individual tools. And I honestly think the tools themselves are pretty unimportant as they go. Like if you forget an integral formula, you can always look that up later. Like that's not something you're going to forget. What you will forget or what like should be instilled earlier is how to how to problem solve. Like that methodology of like breaking down the structure of the problem, understanding what it's asking, maybe developing new questions and being curious and asking more. Like that's what you should get out of these math classes. And that's what I felt is like a very valuable skill, even as I whatever graduate college is just being able to think through these problems like more analytically and with an open mind.
Yeah. No, I always thought that was silly sometimes, like the rote memorization, like I don't know, like when we were like learning like Taylor series or something, like you needed to like memorize like I guess after a while it became intuitive if you understand. Maybe that's not a good example, but like yeah, there's instances where like I don't know, like there's like a table of like I don't know, like the I'm like not thinking of a good. It's been a while since I did math, bro, but like I'm trying to okay, any example where it's like, I don't know, if you have to, like, memorize what a McLaurin series is, like, a lot of times if you're trying to, like, apply that, you in, like, if in real life, if you're working as a mathematician, like, you're not gonna, like, do those things, like, based off of memory, like, you can always reference something, like, it's more important, like, the problem-solving skills rather than, like, those prerequisites, and, like, we don't really have to do that in, even in, like, classes, like, computer science classes, which I'm more familiar with, um you're always allowed to, like, look at documentation, like, you don't have to remember, like, the nitty-gritty, like, how to implement something like that, so, I think that's definitely something important that could be, like, altered. Um, yeah, so cool, dude, okay, so you're also talking about this is a good natural segue, but you're talking about, like, now, like, yeah, like, we have these, AI models, like, even LLMs now are getting better at, like, solving that problem, so, you think about something like ChatGPT, um there's still, I know, some, like, kind of big gaps in its ability to do math problems. I actually had one of my other cousins on here earlier. She was talking about how when it comes to, like, proof specifically or iterative step-by-step problems, a lot of times, like, LLMs, specifically LLMs rather than other AI models, they they'll run into some issue early on, won't correct the issue, and then keep working through it and end up giving you a wrong answer. And she's working with some research team to create like a graph approach where like each iterative step is dependent on the last step. And if like the AI model realizes that one of the steps is off, it's able to correct itself before like going through every sequence of events, then realizing that there's a problem. Um, but so it is a current problem. And like even I know there's like memes or like things on the internet where like it's a simple, like logical problem and the AI is just not able to get it. It's like something very basic. And, like, while even though the AI can, like, do a crazy long derivation of something, it'll, like will miss, like, a simple, like, word math problem. So, do you have any, like do you have you learned about any of that in your classes, like, how these models are using math? And then also, as they get better and better at math, like, how is the landscape gonna change for you mathematicians, like, where you can get it to do a lot more of the computational work for you? And it's not just by computation. I mean, the raw computation's been there for a while now, but now, like, it's able to creatively approach, like, how to solve the problem, if that makes sense, like, more like a human. So just, like, what are your thoughts on that in general? And if I said anything that, like, is wrong, like, correct.
No, no, I think that's a very good question. And yeah, I think so. I guess I haven't learned so much about these developments in AI from my classes, but more just from like reading the news or
Yeah, just your own take.
from other mathematicians. But I mean, I would agree that these models still just really tend to struggle with solving proof-based problems or really thinking, I guess, in whatever way these models think as creatively to solve like abstract problems that humans can. So in that sense, mathematicians are still safe in our jobs and in our ways of thinking about problems. But I mean, these models are still even getting better. I think there was some news story about, I don't know, it was OpenAI or some other company that had one of their models like basically get a silver medal or maybe even a gold medal on the like the International Math Olympiad, like one of the a sample test in that style. So those are proof-based problems, and they're given like 6 hours, and it was able to like basically solve or figure out those problems to like a high degree of accuracy. So they are getting better, and I guess more people are working on bettering these systems. But I don't think there's so much fear, at least in the immediate future, that AI will take mathematicians' jobs. It is a lot more of a kind of working hand in hand. And I think actually the biggest way for mathematicians that it'll help us is that um, these AI models or even just computing in general are getting much better at proof checking. So it's not necessarily that the models are coming up with their own proofs, but we use AI or just in general algorithms to verify that a proof that we have written is correct, right? So oftentimes there are so many like big problems, or even proofs that are out there for big questions that have uh, like answers or proofs that are like thousands of pages long. And like we as humans can read through it, we can use our brains and believe that it's going to be correct, but we can't really know for certain that like any individual person knows that yes, all the argument is correct and this is a right answer. But if we can translate our proof language into something that a computer can verify and just simply use like in a clever way logical deduction to check that it's correct, then we can verify that a lot of results that have been out there um are correct. Like, yeah, there's an example. I think this was maybe even 10 or 20 years ago, but there was this famous theorem called the four color theorem for maps. So basically, that if you visualize a graph or even like a map on the globe, it turns out that any map can be colored with four colors, such that adjacent countries that share a land border are always different colors. But that was an open question until like I think it was the 70s or something, that a proof was made of this problem, but it had to go like some like thousands of different individual edge cases that they had to check. And they put this all in one document. Yeah, the four color theorem. Um, yes. So
No, no, continue, continue. I just wanted to bring it up.
yeah, just for the audience. But
Yeah.
yeah, so the people who solved this problem had a long proof of it, but it had a lot of edge cases and individual work, and like it was the only way they were able to verify I'm sure that was correct was to use computer models to go through all the cases and check, yes, actually we did in fact check them correctly. And even at the time, it was kind of controversial for mathematicians because they were like, well, are we just going to implicitly trust the computer that it was coded correctly or that it actually has the right answer? Like there's some hesitancy to rely. I think maybe it's either distrust in computers or also just, I guess, fear for mathematicians' jobs that like if we're having a computer do so much of the computation, like what will our role look like in the future? So this is definitely a consideration, but I think at least the top mathematicians are trying to embrace AI and these tools more and more to kind of help them and work together to solve problems rather than just shun them away.
Yeah, no, and, like, I think if in terms of, like, all the subjects and areas of study, like, math is, if anything, not gonna be replaced, like, something that can be knocked out completely by AI because, I mean, ultimately, like, to improve and make new models, right, with the AI, like, it's all like, most like, neural networks, like, the very basic underlying components is, like, linear algebra, and then, like, calculus, like, when you talk about, like, gradient descent and, like, back propagation, like, I was listening to a talk about this recently, so it's kind of, like, on the top of my head, like, so like, all these, like, basic things in math and, obviously, like, statistics, like, is huge. If anything, there's gonna be, I feel like, more people going toward math because it's not as we get into, like, a world, like, where AI is taking over things, if when you and just at the general rate of which things are changing, if you learn, like, a specific skill, like, even computer science, like, how to code a specific language, by the time you graduate, like, that's either gonna be obsolete language or, like, AI is gonna replace you, and, like, with math, it's more of one of those fields where, like, it actually teaches you how to think and how to creatively problem solve, and that ultimately can just, like, make you able to go into any field and be prepared to, um, do well in that. So, like, I think, like, if anything, there's gonna be, I mean, already math is big, but there's gonna be a huge explosion in, like, mathematicians and, like, things in that like, where we go back to the core fields, like, maybe, like, physics or math or something like that, because it's becoming more important to just learn how to think rather than be specialized in a subject. I don't know if you agree with that.
No, actually, I very much agree with that. I think my vision for the future or what I kind of expect to happen, whether or not it actually does or whether it's good or bad, but is that almost all kind of like service or even like day-to-day office jobs will kind of slowly be phased out as AI gets better and better. Like I think machines will kind of take farming and like goods and food production and even coding, as you were saying, and kind of take those things on and kind of do it better than humans can. But I think what still separates us is our ability to think and be creative and have these big ideas. So fields like more thought focused fields like mathematics and physics, or even like even biology and chemistry, but more about the idea of designing experiments and kind of looking at things from a larger, more global perspective rather than like doing individual or more menial work will be kind of the jobs of the future. And like in like a utopian vision, it's like that every person is kind of the future in a utopian vision is that everyone's kind of using their brains to what their interests are and trying to work on making society better. So I think there's definitely some fear of this kind of change as like as jobs are slowly phased out and AI and machinery kind of take up more and more of basic everyday jobs. But I think hopefully it's transitioning into a society where we're all like thinking together and collaborating together to solve our world's problems.
Yeah. All right, pivoting a bit here.
Yeah.
I know we talked about this when we met up at the senior forum more recently, but I just want to. I think we had an interesting discussion about it. There's a show that's been pretty big on Apple TV recently. You got to check it out at some point. It's called Prime Target, and it has one of these bigger actors, Leo Woodall. I don't know if you've seen like White Lotus or not, but he's a pretty good actor.
Yeah.
And the show's definitely like kind of silly because there's a lot of like plot holes in it. When I think about it, but the general premise is that um he find then they don't really go into it either because they're expecting most people watching to kind of have a layman's understanding of math, but essentially a lot of encryption today relies on like if you multiply like two large prime numbers and like you have to be to factor the different like factors of those prime numbers like have to do with like public and private key encryption. And he finds like some theorem in the prime numbers where essentially he's able to factor them and find some pattern in that, and then through that like he's able to like crack encryption, and like the NSA and CIA are after him, and he becomes like the most valuable target in the world. And I know like there right now there's a lot of like worry about like cracking encryption, like like with advances in math like this, and then B also with like quantum computing, which kind of has more of a brute force method of like factoring like very large numbers. Um, I don't know. I just wanted to, what do you like have any? Have you learned about this kind of stuff? Maybe not like this from this like show, but like just in general about like prime numbers and like encryption and stuff. And can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I've definitely learned some about it. I mean, I haven't taken a formal class. I know a little bit about RSA encryption and how it works to kind of um, using prime factorization, which is still a problem that's very hard for computers to solve, to like to encode um, or to make sure data is secure. But yeah, I think it kind of exactly what you're saying. Maybe not like this show, but like as computer models or as quantum computing advances, there's some fear that these current methods might be unsafe for keeping data secure. But I think that underscores even more the importance of math and studying math, because I think as old methods, maybe using prime numbers, don't work to store data, there are other mathematical structures or ways that we can develop algorithms which might be more safe against advances in quantum computing or just computing in general. So, I mean, I think maybe even related to some of my work, there's some idea that using actually algebraic geometry, which is one of the areas of math that I'm interested in, um, we could we could actually phase out this focus on prime numbers or prime factorization through like instead of the problem to solve being to factor some very large prime number, you can instead try and find or locate some point with specific coordinates on a very complicated algebraic curve, right? So maybe it's a curve, not just a parabola, but it has like a very complicated equation, and it's kind of hard to dissect whether a specific point lies on that curve or it doesn't, right? And this problem or problems related to algebraic geometry might actually be harder, even so hard that quantum computing isn't even going to be fast enough to really solve those problems. And we
Yeah.
can kind of use and phase into that area to develop new kinds of encryption schemes. So,
Yeah, no, cool stuff, dude. Um, yeah, tell us a little bit. I don't want to put you on the spot here, but actually I will.
no, of course.
I don't know if you see. Do you see this whiteboard that just came up?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Do you wanna like give us a little like idea, like flavor, of what your area of study is and interest is in particular? Um, yeah, for and like kind of in a way where you're assuming there's people who have a limited understanding of math, maybe just like some of the big picture things.
Yeah, no, of course. So I guess I was talking about it for a second, but I think the area of math that I'm most interested, and it's like kind of a broad area, but um, the area I'm interested in the most right now is oh, oops, wait, maybe I can do a text box instead of
Yeah, yeah.
of this.
You don't have to write the word. You can say the word. I'll just
Okay, yeah. So the word is algebraic geometry, which I mentioned before, which is this area of math that combines two parts of two larger fields of math, one being algebra, and not quite the algebra that you learned in middle and high school, and then geometry, like shapes and curves and such things. But it's a particularly cool area because it plays at the interface between the two. So I guess like in a basic sense, algebraic geometry is the study of curves and surfaces defined by algebraic equations. So think like geometric shapes that are defined by specifically polynomials. So maybe like the simplest example is maybe when you were taking algebra 2, you learned about the parabola defined by this equation y equals x squared, right? So that defines a curve in the plane that's kind of like a U. And obviously has some geometric structure to it. But for example, the equation y equals e to the x, like the exponential function, that's not quite an algebraic equation because it doesn't come from a polynomial, right? It kind of it's inherently a little bit continuous and not quite as algebraic. So in algebraic geometry, we don't really study those things. That's more for calculus and analysis, other areas of math. We study we study curves that are defined by algebraic equations. And what you can do is you can use tools in this area of math called abstract algebra, where you kind of you study just the basic axioms and rules of how number systems work, like about how you can add numbers, multiply numbers, and kind of abstract those essential properties of arithmetic to study structures that they're called rings and fields. And there's ways to associate them to these curves. So given a curve or given some like surface looking thing in space, you can associate some system of numbers to it. And then you can do arithmetic or you can do kind of calculations within that system of numbers and uh, learn things on that side, on the algebra side, and then take it back to the geometric situation, to the curve, and learn things about that. So it's a very powerful tool to kind of have this correspondence between geometric pictures, which we can visualize and understand very well, and use some of our geometric intuition about space and shapes to study them, and also translate it sometimes into algebra, where we can actually do more specific computations. We can use the specific properties of how the arithmetic or the operations work, and kind of um, use the interface of the two to get some really strong results about both areas.
Wow, that's really cool. So, do you think like every geometric, and I mean intuitively it feels like the answer would be yes, but do you think like every sort of geometric situation that we have, like just in our 3D world that we interact with, like you could kind of model all of that just in terms of like the I don't know, like polynomial equations that like make it up, like and like in this room around me, I have like a green screen, my camera, like all these things. Like, could you through like create a whole system of equations to like that would encapsulate like all the 3D things, geometric things happening?
I think most of it. I mean, obviously there are some like continuous functions like the exponential, which do exist in our regular world, particularly in like finance, that aren't quite modeled by these polynomial equations. But even those kind of functions can be well approximated by polynomials, right? I mean, if you learn the whole point of Taylor series, maybe we mentioned earlier, for in calculus is that x functions like the exponential can be well approximated by like a sequence of polynomials that gets like finer and finer and gets closer to that function. So I think I guess everyone always says this when they're learning math in high school, like where will I ever use math in my real life? But really, math in particular, like polynomial equations, model almost all kind of phenomenon and even geometry of our world. So it's true on a day-to-day basis, you don't need to understand it to go about your day, but it kind of hides within it kind of some of those secrets to the universe and how things are structured. So I'm for myself, I'm not as interested or maybe as adept at physics, at like studying those physical phenomenon. But when I study math, I do feel like some way I'm getting into the secrets of the universe and understanding like how things work together. And that's really what also that's one of the motivations that keeps me wanting to study math too.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah, no, because one thing, I don't know if you've seen these, but like there's these like viral reels now or like TikToks where like there's like they play like Desmo's games. Essentially, like they had I don't know,
Yeah.
like either they make some really cool type of art like on the spot by like graphing different equations, or there's like these like balls that are like falling from the sky and they have to like create different surfaces out of like the equations to get the balls to land in like the right bucket
Yeah.
over. It yeah, kind of makes me think about that a little because like you can represent so many things like using equations like that. Um, but yeah, cool stuff. Let's talk a little bit about some of your other interests at Penn. So like choir, I mean singing, the Glee Club with the and then also the Shabbatones. Actually, before we go to that, this is my last question. Is like or it's kind of a segue. Do you find like, I don't know, any overlap just and if you don't, there's it's fine. Just thinking but between like your singing and like your mathematics skills, like do you feel like it fits in any way, like in terms of maybe just abstract creativity or some other metric? I don't know.
Y- Yeah, no, I actually do find some surprisingly more overlap than I expected. Like there are a good number of other, in particular in the Glee Club, other mathematicians or people who do STEM fields who are kind of drawn to singing. And I think this is kind of because of perhaps the uh the fact that math is more creative than a lot of people think. That like on a day-to-day basis, you're thinking through new ideas and maybe even like interesting pictures and like it's more expressive in your thought than and your perspective on the problem than you might think. Just like singing is a way to express oneself or to um kind of show yourself to the world. So I think there is that kind of similarity. Um, I think I was drawn to it more so though as it is kind of a break or a release from the very intensely analytical thinking of math. I think there is definitely a different feeling when you're doing both. Like you're definitely more logically focused and analytically focused when you're solving a math problem. Whereas when you're singing, I feel like I can kind of just let go and be in the moment and just feel the song. So
Yeah.
they're different, but there are ways in which I feel like I'm creatively expressing myself in both disciplines. So,
Yeah. Uh, yeah, no, I surprisingly so I'm interested in like I've been doing music production. Like I for me it's like EDM music that I like and obviously very different than singing, but also kind of musical. And yeah, I was surprised to like once I started getting more into like sound design, I found like some overlaps with Matt there too, because you start with like a lot of the like basic like sounds that we hear in most like pop songs or EDM songs. Like you start with like either like a sine wave or like a square wave or triangle wave and like then you're modulating like things like the amplitude and frequency of that and then like the timing of that and like all sounds like when a lot of times like producers now that level has been abstracted away. Like you can use like presets and stuff. But if you want to like design a sound from scratch and virtually make like any sound possibly like imaginable, it all starts off with these waves, which you then which kind of like sound like almost like white noise, like a sine wave, like a harsh, like more white noise type thing. And then you modulate it, and you can create like any sound known like that you could possibly imagine. So yeah, and I think it's interesting to think about like the overlaps between music and math. And yeah, I would say like what's the singing too? Like I again, like talking about my cousin, she's very into like I would say math essentially, more of like AI, but more like the research side of things. So also a lot of math, and she's interested in like voice lessons and stuff too. And I know a lot of people at Penn who are like mathematicians and like or like in the STEM field that then want to express themselves through like singing. So I don't know, maybe like that could be a cool thing. Like someone starts like a choir that's like exclusive to the mathematicians or like STEM majors. Um, but yeah, so with the so which one did you start first? Like, did you were you with the Shabbatones first and or with the Glee Club? And also, like, for someone like me, I don't really know a lot about like singing and stuff like that. So, what's the difference between the two? And I know obviously there's like the cultural differences. But what's like the main difference? Like, is one like singing in a group versus individual, or just tell us a bit about that?
Yeah. So I guess I got involved in both of them around the same time. I guess I've been fortunate that I've been a part of both organizations for all 4 years I've been at Penn. Um, but yeah, it was definitely an interesting experience coming in. I don't think I knew coming into Penn that I wanted to be involved in music and singing in some way. It's something I'd done in high school and I wanted to continue, but I didn't know which group specifically I wanted to join. And kind of it was a little bit random that like I saw the Glee Club perform during those NSO days, and then went in and did some a cappella auditions and found the Sabbatones. But I'm like very glad in hindsight that I ended up with these two communities. And they've really been great. Um, I think to underscore some of the differences between the two. So the first one is the Glee Club, and it's more choral style singing. So that is with a large group, kind of around 20 to 30 people. But it's a little bit more harmony focused. So there's not usually a soloist who's singing above a song, or not as poppy kind of style of music, but it's a lot about harmony, about chords. I guess it's maybe even more similar in some ways to classical music. Like but for voice. Um, but I think there is kind of a very interesting kind of um, balance and even like creativity in how the chords and the structure of the songs um, are put together. Like I think a lot of pop songs these days, they can be very catchy, and I still like them, but they're kind of built up of three or four main chords and have like a very simple structure. But these choral songs can become very complex and layered, especially when you have so many voices and people to play with. So I think in terms of like musicality and learning complex music and also to be a better singer, I've really taken that away from the Glee Club a lot over my 4 years. Separately, there's the Shabatones, so that's an a cappella group, and that is a little bit more like you have one soloist and you have a background who are singing together, but are singing almost to like mimic instruments. So I maybe you can tell by my voice, but in both groups I'm a bass, so I'm singing behind, and I'll be doing a lot of dum syllables to kind of mimic the bass guitar for some song, and kind of like adding to the kind of the band that is supporting someone to sing a song. Yeah, so it's a different style of music, and I feel like that's why I get different things out of them. Like one's more poppy, has given me chances to practice singing as a soloist, as well as like mimicking instruments and being in a background. Whereas the other one is a little bit like more classically musical, and I've learned like music theory and music, like just vocal technique more from the Glee Club. But I've really gained really valuable things from both of them. A lot of really great friends and connections that I'll keep even as I move away from Penn. But yeah, they've both been really wonderful.
Nice, nice. Um, Yeah, I went to an acapella show recently. Very different. It was a South Asian group, Penn Atma.
Yeah, yeah.
Girls. So I yeah, I like find that like the most interesting. Like the singing was obviously great, but like I find like using your voice like as an instrument is like so interesting. And there's a lot of people like in music production too, like they're able to like beatbox and like make sounds with their voice and then they record that into the digital audio workstation and can like edit
Yeah.
it, manipulate it. So that's pretty I think that's pretty cool. Um I personally felt like I personally feel like I had like a knack for that, like beatboxing and like making sounds with my mouth. Um
Yeah.
yeah, I mean I gotta consider like an acapella group.
Yeah, you could try some acapella if you
Yeah.
want. They're always looking for beatboxers, I feel like. So
Yeah, definitely. Uh Yeah, so I don't know, any, like, other experience or anything like, for people maybe who are considering, like, coming to Penn and, like, either pursuing a math degree or, like, um and obviously just you could speak on, like, your experiences themselves, like, or, like, interested in acapella, like, do you have anything you'd, like, wanna, like, recommend to people or something they should think about or, I don't know, for, like, incoming admitted Penn students?
yeah. No, I think Penn overall has been like a really great place to explore like my interests, and
Yeah.
I think for any like student coming in, I think like don't be shy and try really as many things as you want. I mean, I guess people come in with different ideas or levels of certainty about what they want to do. If you have an area that you're very passionate about and know that you want to do it, like get involved right away, take the classes that interest you. Doesn't matter if they're hard. Get to know the professors and the department. Like these are some really smart and often very caring people who work here. So like don't be afraid to make those relationships. But I would say, at least for me, and I think it's good to have that balance to get involved in some sort of extracurricular, even some arts experience if you've never done it before. Like maybe you have some singing experience, so you want to join one of these singing groups, but maybe you've like never really done some arts group before, but there are plenty of like even like dance groups or other like small arts groups on campus that like help you get acclimated into that community. And I think it can be a great way to kind of find a release from like some of the intensity at Penn. Like kind of people are very driven, but they're also very busy all the time and kind of need some time to cool off. You know, we work hard, we play hard, as we say. Um, but yeah, I think finding those extracurriculars and communities outside of your classes are like really important,
Yeah.
especially as you get here those first few weeks. Just like try as many things as you're interested in, and like really take advantage of all that Penn has to offer.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and like last thing before we wrap up, dude, like, what's next for you? Like, is it research? Like, you gonna go for a PhD? Is it gonna be like you want to work somewhere first? Like, what's kind of your idea with that? Like, how do you want to use your master's and grad? I mean, sorry, your bachelor's and master's degree in math.
Yeah. So at least my initial plan going into this year was to continue on kind of the academia path, and I applied to PhD programs. Um, it was a little bit of a tough cycle for me, I guess I would say. I got into one program initially in like February. This was at Emory in Atlanta, so it was very cool. But then as I was waiting to hear back from the remaining programs, they sent me an email before, I might add, the decision deadline that I was told I had to reply by, saying that my offer was forcibly deferred, or basically I would still have an offer, but for the following year, and not I couldn't come in the fall. So there's still some work behind the scenes. It's possible I might be able to attend Emory in the fall for a PhD, in which case that's probably where I'm headed. But this year is a little bit up in the air. I'm looking into some other academic programs uh, around, maybe even abroad, like one in France sounds kind of cool. I speak a little French, so
Yeah,
it seems like a cool opportunity. But otherwise, yeah, like I think as we kind of talked about, like math gives you a lot of valuable skills in just problem solving and thinking about the world. So I'm also just looking for interesting jobs or experiences that I could do kind of for this one year, whether in finance or consulting or like in public policy, to kind of make an impact and maybe live outside of purely the academic world for a year, get some real world experience, build up a little money to have
yeah,
for future study. And yeah, so it's been a little bit of a tough situation, but I think I'll have a unique opportunity to find something to do next year and keep studying and exploring math, like I've done for these past 4 years.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think, yeah, even when things are like a bit up in the air, hey, like sometimes that's an opportunity to do something new. Like for me, um, like I had some medical stuff going on, so like I wasn't thinking too much about like jobs and other internships for the summer or like semesterships. Like, and from that, like I started doing something creative, this podcast. So I think like definitely do something pretty cool. If you end up having some like extra time. But yeah, best of luck with the PhD, dude.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on, Ethan. How did it feel to be on the Unbuttoned podcast? You feeling
Uh,
different? Like, does this do?
I would say, yeah, top experience of my life. As we said, it was no. In all seriousness, it was very great to have this conversation. Just like talk about math and the things that I enjoy, and I think there's a really cool thing that you're doing to kind of get a perspective from all sorts of people around Penn and what they're interested in.